everybody. I'm Dr. Christy Taylor, and I am the founder of Work Solutions LLC. And we are so excited because this is the third presentation of our series of our Diversity Work series. And tonight we are really focusing on creating resilient workspaces. So, here at Work Solutions LLC, we specialize in career branding and workplace resiliency, as well as throwing events like tonight's DiversityWORxKS Round Table. And I am so excited because we have a great lineup of guests tonight who are going to be sharing their experiences in terms of how we can promote inclusive workplaces, as well as build resiliency as leaders and as individuals amongst ourselves. I mean, this is a great panel of coaches. Now, as always, I have to start off, I have to give this disclaimer. The work that we do here, these roundtables, they are not political, they are diverse. A lot of people are sharing their experiences and their perspectives to help grow you both personally and professionally. And I would not be remiss to say that, of course, I am running for Miss Northern States, and I am Miss Maryland Northern States, and my platform is really focusing on building diverse and resilient workspaces. So I decided to use this year's DiversityWORxKS series as the basis for my platform. And so with that being said, I'm so excited to welcome my guests tonight. We have Mr. Jeff Skipper, Dr. Jennifer Bryant, as well as Dr. Andrena Phillips and Mr. Will Lukang. And I'm going to do the grace of letting each of them introduce themselves quickly, and then we're going to jump into tonight's conversation. And I'm really looking forward to it. So, hey, Jeff, how are you?
Fantastic. How are you doing, Christy?
Hey, how are you? So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go to Dr. Bryant.
Well, if you look pretty closely, there's lots of gray hair in here. So I've been doing consulting in the area of change leadership for 30 years now with big organizations, small organizations, just helping them get a return on their investments in change.
All right. And Jeff is also the author of Dancing with Disruption. So we're excited to learn more about that book and get this conversation started. Dr. Bryant, tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. I am a retired federal government employee after 31 years of service, rose from clerk typist to executive director, spent some time in the private sector for 6 years at Capital One, where I served as a chief of staff. And so I left last October. So I am running my business full time as an executive coach, as well as an author and facilitator. So that's my focus.
Dr. Bryant, I look so forward to you just telling us about the experience of leaving the safety of a job to pursue your own business and how you have poured into people. And then we have Dr. Andrena Phillips.
Hey, everybody. I am Dr. Andrena Phillips. I am the CEO and founder of Keep Moving with Andrena. It is a personal professional development consulting firm, and I also certify coaches at Transform You Academy.
Thank you, Dr. Andrena. Look forward to learning from your experiences. And finally, Mr. Will Lukang. Will just recently completed a workshop for us with the Career Resiliency Network, and he also participated in our Prescription for Career Success Summit. Hi, Will. How are you doing tonight?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the warm welcome, Dr. Christy Taylor. My name is Will Lukang, a speaker, coach, and trainer, and a co-founder of the Kairos Executive Program. I'm glad to be here.
All right, and don't forget, Will, I'm going to plug your book for you, right? Will has just recently won several awards for his book. I believe it's called Seeds of Leadership. I was looking on LinkedIn today and saw your picture. I've said you've been traveling all over to Florida and some great spaces. So I'm looking forward to learning more about this. Now, we are in a time of change. I mean, I live here in the DC area. We know that there's been a lot of transition. Mostly in this area, a lot of people are employed by different government agencies. So one of the things that we've done with Work Solutions is we've tried to build out these spaces where we could talk about resiliency, because people need that support. But it's not just happening here in DC, it's happening all over. And guess what? I know it's difficult, but when you take your emotions out of this process, right? Mm-hmm. If you work in the private sector, we know that change happens all the time, and there are layoffs, and these things happen. And so this is why I'm excited to talk to Jeff, because Jeff has spent years really leading change management from an organizational perspective. I mean, he's transformed organizations like IBM and Goldman Sachs, but even from that personal experience to the corporate experience. Jeff, I'm going to kick the first question to you, and so we can start tonight's dynamic discussion on building these resilient workspaces. And you're not only going to learn tonight about what we can do as leaders to cultivate and lead change among our team, but just, so many coaches here on this panel, we're going to be talking about what can we do to become more resilient as individuals, right? And I think that this will be applicable whether you're listening to this today and it affects you, or you're listening to this 10 years from now, right? This is timeless advice. So Jeff, first question goes to you, because you have guided organizations like IBM and Goldman Sachs through major transformations. And what was one change strategy that that you found that consistently helps teams stay resilient during times of uncertainty?
No one likes to talk about the pandemic anymore. Those were terrible times. But I like to remind people, and you'd think, well, what does that have to do with resilience? But when I'm in workshops with frontline employees or leaders, I ask them, what are some of the things that you learned to do during the pandemic that you couldn't do before? And often they look back at me with a blank stare. They don't want to think about it. So I remind them, how many of you started baking, cooking things you hadn't cooked before? How many of you became teachers because you had kids that couldn't go to school? How many of you started using virtual meeting technology you'd never used before and started developing relationships remotely with folks? And on and on and on about all the ways that we adapted. We demonstrated resilience, but didn't think about it during the pandemic. And all that culminating in the fact that we do this on a daily basis. I call them micro adaptations, but we're extremely resilient. We have obstacles in the way all the time, but we take detours, we get around it, and we keep moving. We don't think much about it. So one of the key points that I make for organizations to help them develop resilience is to keep reminding them of how good they've already been at adapting to change, not just in the past, but on a daily basis. They're quite good at it, but our brains play tricks. We tend to think about the tough changes. They were hard, they were difficult. So I have this goal of reminding them, but you've done a lot of change that's been exceptionally good and very impressive. That's resilience.
So who wants to respond to that? Because what I love about what Jeff is saying, because all of us kind of work in this organizational development space, right, with this personal coaching. But I think when we look at Jeff's experiences, he's leading change on this dynamic level. I know I've sat in on some of these instances where you're meeting with the board. Well, I've known people who have met with boards and they work with the boards to facilitate change in their organization. So you've kind of worked all the way up at the top. And I'm looking at, like, how do we apply this stuff to the everyday person? It was something that you just said, Jeff, there, where you talked about looking at what you're already good at, right? And I think that sometimes we forget that on the individual level. So who wants to be the first to respond to points that Jeff has made?
I think I want to respond. I think the one thing that you said that's really resonated with me is we're adapting to change every day. But the thing about corporation is something simple end up being complex for them. So what are the strategies you employ to make them understand that simple things are indeed not complex?
Yeah, this is a great question, because when it comes up, it often does. I say, how many people have built a piece of furniture, say from IKEA? And everyone groans and says, yeah, of course. But what do those manuals do? If they give you a picture of the finished product, and if I said, Will, could you build this? I give you the picture. You'd say, no, I don't know how. I mean, I got all these parts and screws. I don't know what to do with them. So step one, can you find the first board and put the screw in it? Yes. Step two, can you find this other piece and add that? And on till after step 224, you have a bookcase or a desk, right? So this is the thing. We do end up with complex change in organization, which can feel really overwhelming. Great leaders break it down for people who are overwhelmed and say, can you just do these first two steps today? And then let's celebrate your success. So you've got momentum towards the next 224. Great question.
Yeah, I love that. And Christy, I don't know if I have time to respond to that. So what I will say is that as a leader, starting, you're modeling resilience at the top. And so just sharing and being vulnerable and saying, like, even as you reflect back on the pandemic, is saying, I don't know, what we will be doing next, but I'm committed to being this with you as we move forward. And just being vulnerable will help to open up a lot for people.
Yeah, I was sitting in a meeting today, and we were talking about the importance of leaders being vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want to express this though, because I see this a lot on LinkedIn, right? As part of your career brand, it's one thing to be vulnerable; it's another thing to be completely emotional, right? And so there were so many things that Jeff just said where I have folks that are coming to me now who are like, "Well, Dr. Taylor, as a coach, they're like, well, where do I go next? What am I doing?" Because I keep talking about this term career pivot, right? And so I'm just going to break it to the individual level that I want Andrena to respond. And one of the things I just heard Jeff say where he talked about picking up the pieces and you building a piece of furniture piece by piece. Well, guess what? That is so applicable that if you're in a stage of career pivot or, trying to figure out what your next steps are. And so we're talking about organizations, workplaces, and then, as coaches, we're going to share those individual things too. Then you need to look at what you're facing in this moment as you're pivoting. You're literally building this piece of furniture, piece by piece, right? But the whole thing is to get it done. And when we talk about being vulnerable with people, we have to understand that part of our brand is to be able to connect with people as leaders, but that doesn't mean to be emotional. And I really keep emphasizing it to people because I see it on LinkedIn where people are writing dissertations about certain things. And I'm like, you got to recognize it's part of your brand. And when you're interviewing with a company, and I'm talking to the individual, right? They're going to look at this stuff that you're posting. And it's like, okay, this person is in their emotions and feelings. And, people are looking at that stuff. So Andrena, let me have you respond. And then this is a great conversation. So you see the style that we're going to keep going because we're going to dig a little bit deeper.
I just wanted to piggyback and say, even as leaders, we're allowed to be human without the emotions, but be more relatable.
Yes.
And I think that people need to understand that you can be vulnerable and relatable and take your emotions out and still show up in your leadership, even in the pivot, even when you don't know, you can still make it happen, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And I think it's hard for people to find that balance because it's like, yes, and I'll always, most people know I'm in the military. It's like, okay, here's the thing about it. When, as a leader, when I'm giving a task, I'm taking ownership of that task, right? And I think that we are taught, like, I'm not, if Dr. Bryant is my boss, I don't go in and go, well, Dr. Bryant told me to do it. No, I'm just going to go in with my team. And I think that when we talk about building resilient organizations and workplaces, right? And let me let you guys comment on this, that a part of us from a leadership perspective is really building that dynamic of trust. And one of the questions in a class that I sat in that was posed this week is, how do you, when we talk about building resilient workplaces and teams, how fragile is that trust and how do we as leaders go about building that? So anybody want to respond to that before we move on?
I think trust is essential. Without trust, there's no relationship. People won't be working with you and following you if they don't trust you. I think one way of doing it is to create an environment of psychological safety. Make sure that people could voice their concern and not be thought of being, combative or complaining. Develop a self-awareness to listen to people first and understand what's going on as a leader. And being authentic, to add to what Dr. Andrena Phillips mentioned, you be vulnerable and relatable, and you also be authentic because at the end of the day, it's how you present yourself in a real way that actually people would relate with you and they would follow and listen to you.
I agree with them. I think that if you as a leader, as long as the people will trust you, as long as you allow them to have a voice, we can still, even though we're the leader and the captain of the ship, we still have a whole team with us that has a voice that can see things that we can't see. And so I think that if you allow them to play a part in whatever the task or the mission is at hand, you will build trust there because they will feel like they have a voice.
And I would like to take it back to the basics, which is defining trust and working with your teams to ask them, how are they defining trust? And even taking it on an individual level. And there's a doc that I use that I have them it's a working with me doc. And it's a series of questions. And that's a way of just digging a little bit deeper in terms of what it takes to build that trust.
Jeff, I have to turn the final comment over to you on that, because I know it's somebody who is like certified in change management, who goes in and talks to these big wigs, these companies and these organizations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that's skeptical, right? But how do you facilitate that trust process?
Well, I think it's very important to talk about when we get it wrong.
Yep.
Because in every organization, we all know trust essential. Got it? Everyone's going to agree. And then the inevitable happens. A leader does something that breaks trust. And all of us with the level of experience around this table knows, hey, you've been building it maybe for a year, and in that one moment, it's gone. So as part of the cultural aspect, I think we need to set an expectation that, you know what, we're working on this and it's a work in progress, and expect there's going to be mistakes. So it's trust and grace. I think leaders need some of that as well. Of, hey, we're in this together. It's really easy to point the finger at people, but let's do that in a constructive way and help each other get it right. Not to say, we're done here. You broke trust. It's all over.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that part of this thing on grace.
Can I say something? What Jeff said, even though you say have grace, give grace, a lot of times as the leader, we rarely get that grace.
It's true.
We give it,
very true.
We give it, but we're rarely the one that get the grace.
That's true. We're going to come back to this topic of grace, because we're going to keep sharing on this perspective of what we can do as leaders. And then I'll throw some tidbits in there about individuals, because this conversation is going to continue to grow and build, right? Because we're talking about how in these when you're experiencing shift and change in the workplace, or how if you as a leader go into an organization, because I can say, people expect with my military background that I go in and I'm just tough, like, come on now. All right, that's not even realistic. Like, we are so people focused, and I think people miss that. You know what I mean? Like, most of what I've learned about being able to interact and engage with people has come from that experience that I've had. I have been around the most dynamic and amazing leaders, right? Who just simply, I had a commander one time who I remember I was 2 minutes late for a meeting, because it was my first meeting with the organization. I was 2 minutes late. And I had so much respect for this man. And he pulled me aside after the meeting. He said, don't be late again. If you want to be taken seriously, don't. I was like, I literally was lost trying to get to work, because it was my first time. But I tell you what, he said that so softly, so calmly. I was never late again. Okay. I was like, okay, I'm going to be in that seat at this, because I had so much respect for this person. Those are the kind of leaders who can say the smallest thing, but the things that they say, it pours into you or it inspires you. And so, Will, that's actually a great segue into this next question, right? Because you really, you've won, just amazing what you've been able to do with this book that you have, and speaking, you talk on these topics. And one of the things you really focus on is servant leadership. And your philosophy is to really emphasize nurturing talent. And I have to share, Will made me think in a workshop he did a lifetime line, right, of like all of the little setbacks and all of the achievements, so that you can, I was like, I never thought about that. And I love that. That was great advice. And what you did was reflect on, if you get to a stop point in your life, don't forget all of the things that have been successes and have been, challenges, right? And then you remind yourself like how you overcome. And so with this, you have built this business around nurturing talent, right? And so how does this approach really strengthen, when we talk about resiliency, not only as leaders, but also with teams, and even as individuals? You can throw that in there too, right? At the leadership level, the team level, and just like the people that you pour in. What are some of the results that you've seen helping them become more resilient?
I think number one, first, as a leader, you need to really be focusing on serving others. And many people think, especially early on in my career, people think that they're the leader, everyone works for them. It's the other way around. Yeah. And once you realize that, things get better, because you try to spend time and understand what's going on and what's really matter to your people. And to develop resiliency as a leader, you really focus on getting to know your people and understand the challenges that you're facing and how you might actually facilitate and help them, remove the obstacle. Because at the end of the day, as a leader, that's your job. And why it's easier for a leader to work through challenging times and be resilient because they know their why. And if you know your why do you do what you're doing? It's because of your people. You're there to serve your people. And by helping them grow and develop and experimenting with them through supportive environment, you're able to help them grow their resiliency muscle, in my opinion. And over time, they make mistakes, you support them, you don't just reprimand or embarrass them, and help them get through the challenges, or sometimes keeping an eye on what's going on. And before they hit this roadblock or hit the wall, you manage to kind of tell them, hey, there's a wall there, please don't go there. Mm-hmm. And help them to like realize that you're there to help them, and therefore they're paid forward in the future.
Wow, who wants to respond to that? I got a lot of notes, but let me give you a chance to respond.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump right in because I like the reference to the why part. I've been doing some research in the area of the importance of purpose, sense of purpose, and I know you're getting at that, Will. And I keep seeing this one number coming up, and it's 50%. So a study's done, asked people, if you saw another job that offered more purpose, would you go? 50% say yes. Gartner does research, Gallup does research. Do you feel you have meaning in the workplace? 50% say no. So there's the real hunger out there. And what is purpose? It's seeing an impact, being connected to other people. So I want to know that you care about me, you care about your community, you care about others. That's extremely motivational. That really resonates what you're saying. Well, good stuff.
And I agree as well. And I always start with my big why.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And I say your big why has to be bigger than your ego. Yeah. And there's a philosophy I've had over the last 10 years that people are at the beginning, middle, and end of every process and decision. Once you invest in them, they will go above and beyond for the mission. So that aligns with what you were saying, Will, in terms of, as a leader, I work for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your why have to outweigh your excuses too.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yes. Your why have to outweigh your excuses too. So, and the purpose is greater than motivation, because we know motivation comes and goes. So the why and the purpose has to outweigh everything.
This is very interesting when we talk about the why, right? And I'm really just looking at this from when I say OD, y'all, I'm talking about organizational development, but we use the acronyms, but let me make sure I say what it means for those people watching in. And I'm also from a coaching perspective, right? And I'll have people to ask me questions like, well, Dr. Taylor, I really don't, when we talk about the why, I think people often associate that with job title. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like if my job title is not vice president, then I don't know the why. Why am I doing it? What is the response to that? Because how do you help people? And especially in this time where you may be in a pivot in your career, you're finding yourself building that IKEA table that Jeff talked about piece by piece, right? And you're rebuilding. I think that, and I have to find the title of this book while we're talking, when you're trying to figure out their why. And this is what I'm gonna tell you what I'm running into, and you may have seen it with some of your clients as well. And I'm talking about when we're coaching. I'm talking coaching at the individual level. Your purpose has been so connected to whatever it was that you were doing, that when you're no longer attached to that anymore, you don't even know your why. Because that job, that title, all of that stuff you were doing was your why. It was so interconnected into your personality that once you're no longer have that title or doing that thing anymore, it's hard to make that transition. So what do we tell folks who are really in a space where they're looking for the why, or they might have the job, they might not have the job with the title that they want, or, how do they find purpose in it? How are you advising people, or what advice would you give?
Your why is about serving people, regardless whether career-wise or business. Your why is about serving people. And I think that if you don't understand that from any aspect, then you're mostly in ego.
See, we're going back to that. We're going back to that statement I made that your big why and purpose has to be larger and bigger than your ego. Yes. And it's sometimes you got to go back to the basics, as I talked about before. When you're sitting with your clients and you're trying to figure out and asking those questions of self-discovery, and asking them what are their goals. And sometimes they might have to take a pause, but not a stop, before they can start again. And going back to what Jeff just mentioned earlier, is that reminding people of all the goodness, right? Having them to recognize all the goodness they've done before, and that they can do it again. And also realizing that you are not your work. So it comes back to your own identity. And how do you define yourself? And it's so interesting when you go and ask people, who are you? And they start off, especially in this DC area, right? They start off with their titles. No, I don't know who you are.
Yes.
So yeah.
I want to also, I know as you guys respond to this, I also want to interject just comment on giving yourself grace, right? That you might be in that transition period, and it's kind of like, okay, this is who I was. I was the branch director or the vice president. You're not in. It doesn't take away from your leadership. It doesn't take away from anything you've done, but your identity. You're no longer in that space. So what is the next step? So what are the comments? What is your perspective, Jeff, on that? In terms of, when the why no longer is associated with the title, or you're in that pivot or in that moment, how do you continue building that level of resiliency?
I want to ask people, who is your customer? Who is it that you serve? Coming back to Will's phrase. And often, especially in leadership positions, there's lots of customers that you've got. So as a servant leader, you're serving your customers, your people on your team. Then I've got other parts of the organization. Then I've got folks that are outside the organization. They're all customers of some sort. And then also it's a point to remind folks that some folks are really only in it for themselves. I'm showing up to work to punch the clock. I need to take a paycheck home because I've got personal goals that aren't the same as what my organization is trying to do. Or I've got family responsibilities that really prevent me from working overtime and trying to get ahead. So I just need to take that paycheck home. But for most people, when they reflect on who's your customer, who's important to you, that you're actually serving on a day-to-day basis, no matter what your job is, I don't care if it's janitorial or accounts payable, you got a customer. And what is it important to them? What is important to you about how they respond to your work? What can you do that makes them smile? Do you even know how they react? One of the most powerful things that leaders can do is bring the customer into the conversation, because many never meet their customer. And that can be extremely inspiring and motivating. And that drives a sense of purpose.
To add to that,
relationships are very important. Building relationships.
I totally agree with that. Going back to what Jeff said, is if the person can't really articulate who their customer is, I often go back and ask them, what's your superpower? What are you really good at? What's your superpower? Because if they don't interact with the customer on a daily basis and they can't describe them, then they're stuck. And a way to kind of unstuck them is say, what's your superpower? What are you really good at? What are your gifts that truly exemplify your ability and separate you from everyone else? And by understanding that, they're able to now reflect on, I'm good at this, so this is how I could help other people. And then the other ways I did it before was going back in time, like what Dr. Taylor was saying. I did a presentation with a timeline series of my life, when I faced challenges, when I had struggle, when I had success. It's important to take the person down that memory lane. What are the challenges the obstacle that you survived from? What are the challenges you overcome? And those are the ones that you could remember and say, those what you could bring to the table when you don't know what you really, how you add value to other people.
Andrena, I don't think. I'm sorry if let me just see if Andrena, have you had a chance? Dr. Bryant finished, but I think Andrena has had not a chance to respond as well.
Oh yes, I responded early in the game.
Yeah, what I was going to say is that sometimes I work with clients that they don't know what they're good at. And so I give them the assignment of going to ask 3 people to tell them, just ask them, what am I good at, to hear what they say and see if there's a common theme. And then I also ask them to go look at past performance evals, right? Evaluations, and see if are there common themes in there in terms of the outcome and the results that you bring to an organization or to your family or to your friends. So sometimes you have to help them along that, along that path.
Dr. Bryant, I got a question. Do you think we leaders should be asking ourselves those same questions?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We should ask ourselves. I've asked people, right? Because sometimes you think you're really good at something, somebody not quite.
Right.
You need some work in that area. You're like, ouch.
Right. Absolutely.
I was driving in my car today, and I was in my trip home, and I was thinking about, I can go into something strong, right? But then, I think life has this way of giving us, we'll say it's karma or the lessons, right? I think that's Erickson's theory, where we repeat these cycles until we master it, right? And I find myself continuously running into the same stuff, and I'm like, it's something about me, God, that I gotta do better in this situation. Like, I think as leaders, we gotta be in this constant, as Andrena pointed out, state of self-assessment. Because how do you tell and give feedback to other people if you're not gonna be willing to take feedback or even just assess yourself, right? And be in a constant state of trying to grow yourself personally and professionally, but just honestly being real with yourself. Like that, I remember when we started doing some of these events, it's like you look back on it like, whoa, that was a hot mess, right? And then, we get better and better in this space. I remember trying to do TikTok when it first kicked off, and I'm like, oh my God, Jesus.
But you tried.
Yeah, that's right. She tried.
You tried.
Yeah,
I'm just, go ahead.
I got to ask this group, because it's such a good group of folks who do some level of coaching in our work. One of the ways I assess people that I'm working with is determine how good they are at introspection, self-reflection. If they cannot do it at all, we have a significant problem.
Yeah.
Yep. You must do the work at all times. Do the work.
And
that's a self-awareness piece.
Right. Yes. And it relates so well to this concept of resiliency. You cannot bounce forward until you can look inward and see what I do well, what didn't go well, and how can I improve that.
And I think Dr. Christie made a point earlier today about leaders not being emotional.
Yeah.
We are human, as Dr. Andrena talked about. And it's okay from a self-awareness point, because there have been several points in my life, as Will talked about his challenges and in things that work well, where I've had to say, I need a pause. I need to stop for a moment. Let me get back with you. And I may go quietly in my own room and yell, scream, or pray, or whatever the case may be, to get through what I need to get through to make sure that I'm showing up as my best.
To be clear about that, guys, because there have been times, especially like I had, as leaders, there might be times where even as we reach out or we recognize the people, that we might be moved to tears, right? And I think that there's an emotion in that. That's your humanness, right? But I think hopefully that everybody understands what I'm saying from your career brain. It doesn't mean to be stoic, but when you're looking at what you're doing on social media and how you're engaged, I'm navigating. If you're navigating through the political climate, I was up front and said, hey, we don't do the politics here because I'm continuing to do the work of diversity, right? And the way sometimes to do that work is to continue to walk in the fire, but you do it by focusing on the things and topics that are important. But when you look on my social media pages, you don't see, we talking about resume writing and career branding, because that's the career brand. This is where we are and what we do, right? And so we've all been in this space where we're working it to lead change, but that is how we continue to push things forward. So for those of you who are listening to these conversations tonight, I hope that you take something from this, because we're not only talking about this from a organizational perspective. We're looking at this and sharing personal experiences because we want to understand our humans. The great thing about coaches is that we've experienced it, right? We built something from the hot messes that we've been in the past, basically, right?
We had to go through it first.
Exactly. Imagine, you know, I'm this career coach, and then in January I found myself laid off from a job that I thought I was going to be at forever. And I'm talking about the things that I'm telling people, those are things that I've experienced. But when you didn't expect it, and now you got to pivot quick, you know. And so I'm like, I go into my workshops and I'm like, hey, I have lived through the shock of this, so there's nothing I'm telling you that I ain't done. And so I think that when we talk about giving ourselves grace, I want to pivot to Dr. Phillips here, and let's talk more about your experiences, because I'm going to come back to that word grace 15 times that Jeff said. And I got building your why from Will and giving yourself grace. Now, that don't mean be late for work every morning. A little grace, right? You know, Andrena, you have worked with high achieving women. Again, this applies to anybody, though, to shift their mindsets and lead unapologetically. And so when we talk about building this resilience, and I specifically, when you answer this question, and we'll get into a few banters on mindset, right? And especially at leading unapologetically. How do you help individuals rebuild resilience when they have faced setbacks or burnout? Because that's real. That is something real as leaders experience.
One thing I do with my women or my clients is I remind them of who they were before the pivot, during the storm, and afterwards. And when I constantly remind them of who they are, it taps into their true identity. It makes them recognize that I know I can handle this. I can lead. I can be in this position. Because really the challenges are the setbacks is for you to show up in your best version of yourself. And the burnout is a reset. And the pivot is showing you that you can do it no matter what is served your way.
So let's break each one of those down. Who's gonna respond first to Andrena? Let's just like 3 points to break down here.
You know,
Go ahead, Joe.
One of the important things we can do as leaders, I think, is go story hunting. And we'll see how this connects to what you said, Andrena. But it is about finding the examples of people getting things right. So you run into an obstacle, you're having a failure. So I talked about looking back to the pandemic, you learn many things. But even within the broader organization, even in the toughest times, even with the most difficult disruptions, someone's out there just doing it, putting in the work, grinding it out, finding success, and letting that be an inspiration to others. So even if you can't find it in your own history, you can probably find it in someone else, and that can help motivate you. Burnout's really tough. I've been there myself several times. Emotionally, it's exhausting. So you look to others of how are they getting through? Can I absorb some of their enthusiasm, their joy, and use that to help me get back on track? So I do a lot of story hunting.
Well, the burnout is the reset. The burnout is the pivot. The burnout is for you to regain who you are truly at the core.
I think to add to what Jeff said is, I think I look at it as a leader, you dealt with the situation with empathy, right? With empathy, and really focus on the care of the person. And at the same time, when things go south, really figure out what are the lessons learned. And that's what I always said. It's not so much always about the people. It's about the process. And always there's things to learn about what went wrong. So therefore, you could bring those lessons before you move on. Don't rush to the next opportunity or next situation without learning the lessons. Because if you don't learn the lesson, you'll go back and repeat it again. People say history repeats itself. No, human repeats itself, not history. History didn't do anything. History recorded it. You're going to say over again. So it's really important as a leader to help your people understand what happened, support them, and give them the opportunity to bounce back.
I like that. And I would add the importance of prioritizing well-being and balance. And that helps, like, because resiliency isn't about grinding harder. It's about sustaining your energy. And what does that look like? Is that supporting mental health, providing those employee assistance program information, or just, providing resources, whether it's the Calm app, as a leader, you can give people subscription to that. Just look at what will encourage the flexibility. Maybe it's half days on Fridays once a month. Maybe it's invest in yourself. My last company, we did a invest in yourself day, and you did what makes sense for you. And then you model whatever that work-life integration looks like. So we just have to be, we just have to remind ourselves as leaders. And when I say this, in Dr. Andrena, I go back to this, I'm saying this for ourselves as well, right? As leaders, that we prioritize that well-being and that we schedule ourselves, right? Schedule ourselves in our meetings. I did it for decades, right? Where on Fridays, I didn't have meetings, no meeting Fridays. If you have an admin or just yourself, just schedule you time where you are actually working in and integrating your well-being and balance.
Somebody say today, work your calendar.
Yeah, work that calendar.
Don't let it work you, right? Work that calendar, don't let it work you.
Absolutely.
I think Jews and I have gotten into the routine of, like, as soon as something hit, if I'm running an event or something like that, hey, that calendar for that night is blocked, right? Because I'm already working a full day and then jumping into the next event. And we've had to kind of get to that space where we are building. But I wanted to go back to a couple of things. And one of them is, he'll jump back in. But one of those, can you hear me, Will?
Yep.
Okay, or you popped off for a second. All right. Will, now look.
Will said I'm out. Will said I'm out. I'm out.
Will said I'm taking a mental break.
I still teach courses in American history, and when my fall classes begin, I promise you, I say this every semester: history repeats itself. But you know what I'm going to say when my class starts next week? Well, I'm going to say history doesn't repeat itself. Humans do. I want to spend just a minute floating around, guys, before we get to our last question with Dr. Bryant. I want to touch on this based on something Dr. Andrena said, where she talked about that pivot and say that again. What the pivot is, the burnout, right? When we talk about the resiliency, right, the importance of resiliency, I want to talk a little bit about mindset, right? Because that's something we really haven't touched on, but it's a core piece of Dr. Andrena's work, because sometimes it can just, as individuals, right? Sometimes if you're experiencing tough times, it could be just, I can't even get out of the bed. People been there, done that. That's the humanness, right? So what do you do, from at an individual level to deal with your mindset? Because one of the things we don't want as we have these conversations is to underscore the lows and the valleys, right, that people might be experiencing, and because you didn't just pop up at the peak, right, the top of that mountain. So I want to start that with Andrena in terms of how do you manage your mindset and in terms of building a resilient you and a resilient organization or team. And then we'll float around for a second.
You talking about your mindset as individuals?
Yeah, how do you cultivate that mindset to help you build that level of resiliency? Because I don't know if y'all seen that. It's like this little TikTok with somebody in their car going away. Another day, another 8 hours. Another day. But I
believe you have to pour into yourself before you pour into others. And you have to feed your own mindset. You have to take time to, I want to say, like Dr. Jennifer was saying, that mental awareness.
Before, that sometimes as a leader, you need to give yourself the time.
I think there might be a lag. I think there might be a lag. Will, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. We're going to finish. Dr. Andrena was responding. I think that there was just a lag here. So
I know Will was being my wingman. I ain't worried about it.
Go ahead,
but I was just saying, I was just saying, with our mindsets as leaders, you have to feed you first before you try to feed somebody else. So you have to deep dive into your own mental. You have to be able to know when to shut it down, when to turn it on, but feed yourself before you feed other people. That's my take on it.
Will, did you want to respond to that?
No, I think as Dr. Bryant did mention before, I think as a leader, you need to learn to step away and give yourself the time to work on the things that you need to work on. And it also adds to building your resiliency, is knowing to say you can't really pour from an empty cup. And also, once you recover, then get back and helping your people to actually move forward.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff and Dr. Bryant?
So few things, and I'll be quick. I was running a workshop with a group 2 days ago, and there's one little exercise I run all the time. And I say, let's go around the table. Tell me something you do to recharge yourself. And they all share something. Usually, eventually you get, I have a glass of wine at night, and then someone will say only one, and off you go from there. And in about 45 seconds, the entire group is smiling. I said, this exercise is over. What just happened? You just got to recharge just by thinking about how you do it. So taking time for yourself, even visualizing the things that we can do to help ourselves, and then reminding ourselves, I need to go take time is good. So that's one thing. Second is there's research now indicating that if we shift our mindset from, hey, my battery gets depleted through the day, and that's when I end up at home going, oh, I just finished another 8 hours, right? But instead we think of it as, when I complete challenges, when I endure them, when I get through something, when I make it through that hard day, I actually get stronger, like a muscle, right? The more I do it, the stronger I get. There's a mindset switch in that actually helps us live that way and not get so drained. So there's a few things we can do about mindset to really help ourselves.
Well, another day, I now didn't meet that little TikTok, another 8 hours of being fake. Right? Dr. Brown, I don't know if you go ahead and respond to that, because the last question goes to you. Have you already had a chance to respond to this?
So no, I haven't had a chance to respond to it. And it goes, I made the point earlier in terms of the importance of self-care and the importance of really taking care of yourself. And then when you have these moments of exhaustion or emotional moments, like I go through the, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Do I need to take a nap? Like I go through all of those steps first. And then I also dig a little further and do the 5 whys with the problem solving with my own self. Like, okay, why am I feeling that way? Or why is this way, to kind of get down to that root cause? And then I'm like, okay, I understand it. I understand me now, and this is how I'm going to solve it. But the other piece of it too is, I remember I talked about leaders modeling the way. I worked around leaders who jogged all the time. They ran. I wondered, why do they run all the time? But and I took some time asking a few of them. They said it helps them problem solve.
Mentally.
It helps them,
I've been in the military 18 years, and I'm still trying to figure out why. Oh, just let me get to the end of this 2 miles.
It's the mental.
Well, I try to walk, right? And so it's non-negotiable. So we have to make ourselves non-negotiable in terms of our self-care. Yeah.
I love that. Making sure that you prioritize yourself. Now, this is going to go about 10 minutes over, guys. So I hope that you're okay with it, because I got to make sure everybody do their plug. This has been such a great discussion. Like, it always starts out because everybody's like, okay, how am I going to respond to that?
Uh-oh, you went mute. Is it just me?
No, she went mute.
Okay.
Oh, can you guys hear
there
me?
You go.
Yeah.
All right. No, I always say it's always kind of, when we first started, everybody's kind of always finding their footing for where the conversation is going to go, right? And this is why I love doing these roundtables. I'm going to say every summer, because this was our second summer doing them, right? But it's just such dynamic conversation. Dr. Bryant, the last question goes to you before I go mute, hopefully. Your work focuses on mid-career professionals. And again, we've been talking about everything from giving yourself grace to pivoting and managing your calendar. Now, you support underrepresented groups, mid-career professionals, How do you see resiliency playing a role in helping these individuals to break barriers and to rise into leadership roles?
That's interesting. And so specifically, I work with mid-career women. And that's, the data, going to the point that Jeff makes, that there's drop off that happens there. And something is stopping them from getting to that director level or above. And the clients that I work with, a lot of times, and even when I was working in the corporate world, is reframing their mindset. We talked about that. Having them to move away from those setbacks and reframing those setbacks or the feedback that they get as opportunities for growth. And again, investing in their self-care, staying adaptable, and elevating agility with authenticity. So what I just gave you was a RISE framework, whether y'all realize it or not, right? Is that R was reframe setbacks, I was investing your self-care, the S is stay adaptable, and E is to elevate others. And elevate agility with your authenticity. And so I had to lead a business resource group with 24,000 members, and it was a women's group, talking about being resilient. And again, finding that it was hard for people to move past that midpoint as a manager or senior manager to that director role, because what was holding them back was mindset. What was holding them back was having their board of directors, people to help them to get to that next level in terms of sponsorship, mentorship, and other ways to help them through, being resilient. So yeah, that's where my focus is on the mid-career, because I have a passion for them.
Make a comment before you guys jump in. Last month, Will, we had your partner, Jenny, on, and one of the comments she made about women in the workplace is that oftentimes women sometimes are hesitant to even apply for those roles of directors and leaders, because the distinction between men and women is like, men are just like, go for it. Right. Because it's like, you know what I mean? They're just like, and I'm in my environment, in my military environment, I used to work in an area port. Man, it's all guys, right? So I kind of got that hoorah attitude of like, man, just go for it. Y'all see, I be up here doing anything, right? Man, just doing stuff, right? But women, sometimes it's like, even as a career coach, I see this, right, where we talk about, they might look at a job description and go, I don't have the exact skills. Whereas a man might just apply for, statistically, a man more likely to apply for a job that he might not even specifically qualify for, just because the only thing that they can do is tell you no. And as a result of that conversation, I've been telling, when I do these live events and panels, I was like, just apply, because I always have said that, but now even more of an emphasis on, because just apply, because the most that they can do is say no. So let me give you guys a chance to respond to Jennifer's comments. And then we're going to wrap up tonight's conversation, because this has been great.
Dr. Bryant, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How do you start that conversation with the person to help them learn what are the things that they need to work on? How do you initiate that conversation?
So what I do is I ask them, what are their strengths? And then I ask them, what are their areas of opportunities? And this goes back to what we talked about probably about 50 minutes ago, is do they have self-awareness of what their opportunity areas are? I also ask them, what's the type of feedback they're getting, right? And to see, and I also ask them if they're asking certain questions of their leaders. How is it that you want your leader to show up for you? And sometimes they're like, oh, I didn't think about that, because sometimes we as humans put expectations on leaders without even asking. You make great assumptions. Why isn't my leader doing this? Why didn't they put me in for that? And well, have you had that conversation? Are you having talent conversations with your leader? And pretty much majority of the time they had not, because they thought that it was something that happens automatic, and it doesn't. And that's what I help them with, is like strategically positioning themselves to show up in the marketplace for wanting more. and helping them to develop those leadership skills of what does that look like, positional leadership, and several other things that I walk them through. Does that answer your question, Will?
No, absolutely. I love the fact that you should ask your leader as to, what and how. I think that's important. Having that conversation and level setting the understanding, and also letting know you're interested.
Correct. Goes back to Christy's point about, women don't apply because, the data is out there. Like, 100%, the men don't have 100% of the qualifications. They're going to apply. And then women, we feel like, oh, we got to have 100, whereas men may say, I only have 60. And so we holding our own selves back.
Because can I say something? The reason why, because the way that men and women approach business is totally different.
And I suppose as a leader, we also need to make sure when people are applying.
I think it's the lag again, Will.
Yes, the lag
again.
What I was saying was that a lot of times men and women approach business different. Women approach business with emotion, where men approach business with logic. So a lot of times we as women don't go for those high positions because we're always overthinking or we're in our emotions, where men is looking at the logic side of it.
I would love to hear from Jeff and Will when Will gets back connected to here.
Yeah, because women will go into a hole on
we'll go in a whole spiel.
Yeah.
But that's honest. Even working with high achieving women, that's the one thing that they do. They focus more on their emotions instead of being logic about the situation. So when we look at it from an emotional standpoint, we'll talk ourselves out of the position. Whereas a man, he's looking from a logic position and saying, look, I want that position. I'm gonna go for it, whether I got the credentials or not.
And I just have to add this in there because I know we got to let the guys jump in on this because this will be the. But I wanted to come back with it to just point of the data, right? There has been studies that shown that once women do enter these types of positions in leadership, that nurturing aspect of women as leaders, those things, those qualities that we think that would not make us good leaders is actually okay. That's all I'm gonna say. Let me become a girl club. Right, Jeff, in there.
So
Jeff.
I want to throw in another spin on this, and for those that are listening in, I want you to know we know you're there. So we've seen the names, we appreciate the comments, and I want you to hear the response of my peers when I pose this, and that is what you're also hearing is the fact that every single person, man, woman, don't care about the role, suffers from some level of imposter syndrome. You see the heads nodding?
Yes.
All of us, all of you. And it's okay to admit that, to say, sometimes I feel like I can't do even what people think I can do. That's okay. As long as you keep pushing forward. And that's harder for some of us. So again, I'm sure I'll see heads nodding when I say that's a lot of our coaching as well, is helping people who feel like, I'm in this position. I now need to do these things I haven't done before. And I'm not sure that I can. It's okay. You can work through that. And you might make some mistakes. You might fail a couple times. But if you handle that in a certain way, you'll get through it and you'll be okay. Absolutely. So that's why we do this work that we do. And that's what helps people build the resilience, is to understand, yes, I don't always feel comfortable trying to do all these things, but you'll get there.
And you know what, Jeff, when I took on that role of leading that business resource group, when I was approached to lead that group of 24,000 members, I was like, who, me?
Right.
Who, me? So I had to rely upon my board of directors to do a check-in with them. I was like, hey, I'm nervous. I'm this, I'm that. I was vulnerable about that. But then it came back to my big why and purpose. And I had to focus on those strengths that I had while developing my other opportunity areas.
And I do have to make a comment, Jennifer, in terms of what you're referring to as board of directors. You're talking about your personal board of directors, right? Because some people don't know what that means, right?
Yes, the personal board of directors I had mentioned earlier, like your mentor, your sponsor, somebody who's championing you, Yep.
Will, are you back? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, there we go, Will. So we got to let you jump in on
this. We need another man. We need another
man. Off of the cliff of women walk in terms of women in the workplace and in the diversity. Okay, so what are your thoughts on and comments? Because I know you had some good things to say.
I think as leaders, we need to make sure when we have spot available, we need to make sure there's equal men or women applying for the job. We should be asking that question, not just whoever applied for the job. We should interview them. We should make sure there's equal representation of diverse group of people applying for the job, not just like, oh, there's 10 people applied and there happen to be all 10 men. You should ask the question, why? Did we not really communicate this, or did we not really emphasize on making sure we need a diverse background? I think that's number one. Number two, if you're a leader, you need to make sure that everyone working for you assume that they really want to move up and have a conversation with them. I know it's really hard to do that as a leader, to be able to have a one-on-one with all your people, but make an effort to do at least once a year. At one point, I had about 480 people on my team, and I do one-on-one with everyone. I try my best to do one-on-one, at least with everyone throughout the year, and to make sure that I have a 30-minute conversation. And there's no agenda. When I set up those meetings, it's them coming with the topic, not me sending any agenda with them. So it's really initiate.
Yeah, it's so important to be intentional. I think about 7 years ago, I was literally I just do stuff because I get bored, right? Because I got out of the military in 2008, and then in 2015, so it's been about 10 years now. 2016, I got bored, so I was like, I'm gonna go back to the military, and decided to walk in off the street to join the reserve. And when I got there, they were having this officer board, right? And anyway, I ended up commissioning. That was not my intent. I was just there to, be like master sergeant or whatever to make rank and retire. But it was men who were intentional. Now I did the board. I made a 100 on the board, so that made it easier, for me to get selected to become an officer because I was the top candidate. But the people who took me under their wing, to Will's point, they were very intentional about how I was mentored and preparing me to get to the next step. And this is why I say about the military model, because I have so much respect for it. It's like they're talking to you about where you're going, really any rank, right? But they're talking to you about what's your next steps and where you're going to go and where you're going to progress in your career. And you're being intentionally set up with this structured model to get you to that place and stage you want to be. I mean, I'm planning my career for what 4 to 6 years out looks like in terms of where I want to be and where I want to go and what retirement is going to look like for me, right? And so I think that as leaders, when I'm doing things related to organizational development at the level of change that I support, because I really focus on the people development side of it, those are the kind of questions that I think that we should be really asking people when they come into our organization and we're seeking to partner with them. Guess what, guys? We got to end this conversation though. It's been dynamic. We can do 10 more. We can do 10 more events based on these topics alone. But it's time for us to get to our final comments and shameless plugs. Now, this has been really great tonight, and it'll be something. We had a really engaged audience. It'll be something that folks will come back and listen to, and you'll see the sound bites. But we are in a time where people are pivoting, because people keep asking me, Dr. Taylor, what does pivot mean? Because it used to mean, well, I'm going to start a whole new career on purpose. But like, if you find yourself to go into work on a Friday, but then you come in on Monday, you don't have no job, baby, you got to pivot because the rent's still going to be due on the first, right? So what are you pivoting to? And then in the process of pivot or transition, how do you find that whatever that thing is that you are seeking to connect with next, how do you find that why? And then as leaders, when you are tasked with leading change, you guys know I have my own framework, which is the REBT-DEIA framework, because I focus a lot on mind shifts, like the book that I wrote some years ago. Now it's kind of like, okay, if you can navigate through the difficult conversations related to diversity, right? You really, as a leader, can lead any conversations around change, especially if you're looking at it through that constructive model. Those conversations can be difficult and emotional, right? But if you think about any type of change that someone leads, as soon as you say, we're going to change the color of the bathroom paint in the organization, like, why we got to do that? I don't like that color. It's always going to be something. It's always going to be something. You can lead.
Race issues are always the most.
Right. It can be like, it can be anything. So it's like, not everything is going to be like some large scale. If we look at Cotter's model, right? That large leading dynamic change. Sometimes it can just be, well, we're going to add a sign. Well, I don't like the color of the sign.
Yeah.
So, but
right.
But so we're talking about organizational change and how do we change ourselves to make ourselves as individuals become more resilient in a time of dynamic change. but also how do we continue as leaders to spark those conversations and to engage with people and to promote, because we know that people don't, that we need diversity. The people are not a monolith, right? So whether it's diversity of people and experiences and how we're training this next generation, this stuff is still necessary. These conversations are still relevant. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, the panel, to give me your final plug. Tell us, we're going to kick it off with Jeff started off our conversation. So Jeff, tell us about, give us your final words of wisdom in terms of, building a resilient workplace and career. And then let us know where folks, what do you have coming up next and where people can find you. And of course, we're going to share your information in the chat with our audience.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. Well, you can see I wrote a book called Dancing with Disruption. A lot of what we face today is around disruption, and that's why resiliency becomes more and more important. And my final thought would be to say, because we are faced with so many things around us that are challenging, ask yourself, what is your anchor? What is it that you hold on to that becomes your compass, your core beliefs, your North Star when it feels like things are a bit out of control, you're not sure what to do. And that becomes your center point. And having that anchor makes it much easier to navigate some of the disruptions we face. It generates resiliency. You're welcome to look me up on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. Lots of free resources on my site, which is jeffskipperconsulting.com. And encourage you to look up my books. I've got a couple of them out on the topic of change leadership. And Christy,
love that. Thank you, Jeff. And also, I have to mention that Jeff was, we've done about 50 plus interviews since we kicked off our magazine in January. And Jeff was one of the many dynamic individuals that we've had an opportunity to interview and engage with. So check out his article on workglobalnews.com, as well as his interview on our site. All right, Dr. Bryant.
I got to remember to do my magazine article. You reminded me.
Yeah.
All right. What I will say is that resilience is not about avoiding challenges. It's about transforming them into stepping stones and taking one step at a time and realizing you've been through other situations and you'll get through this as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to pause. It's okay to take a break and know that it's about you adapting and creating pathways for yourself and for others to follow. So believe in yourself and you got this. You truly, truly got this. Mm-hmm. And what I have going on, if people go to my website, they will see I just recently launched a Leadership Unlocked self-paced leadership course. And it's for our mid-career women. And it's going to offer them clarity, confidence, and opportunities to work with me one-on-one. But I have a self-paced course that I just recently launched. You could find it on my webpage. And I have 3 books. I have several books. Several books. But these are my babies, right? And so these are Step into Leadership Greatness. And it's a series of 3 books where leadership isn't just a title, so you can lead from wherever you are. Leaders producing leaders, so you're lifting while you're climbing, you bringing other leaders with you. And the last one is more about elevating others to new heights and becoming a force multiplier. So you can find those on Amazon or my website.
Okay. And Dr. Andrena?
Yes, I just wanted to encourage all leaders because everybody is a leader in their own right. And even when resilience show up in your life, just know that the setback is the comeback for your greatness and to still play full out. And as leaders, to always remember 3 things: to adapt to rapid change, to always prioritize your mental health, and finally, continue to develop any possible way that you can. Those are my 3, I call them my 1, 2, 3s for the leaders. And then I also have a book that is called Thrive 365. And in it just talks about holding you accountable every day in your leadership role as well as in your personal life. And you can catch me on LinkedIn I know I love to laugh, so sometimes y'all gonna find laughter up there. I think leaders should always show their side, their personal side to a degree, so people can know that you're relatable, and just continue to just grow.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And Will?
I think developing resilience as an individual, I think I would focus on self-awareness and developing your emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, and also making sure that you develop a growth mindset. I think that's important for you to be resilient over time. And as a leader, I would say leaders should model the way. We should be transparent and we should show empathy to our people. And last but not the least, as a leader, create an environment of psychological safety. Make sure our people are comfortable to come to us and tell us what's on their mind, and being able to have a real conversation with them. Be authentic. And last but not the least, if we made a mistake as a leader, own up to your mistake, apologize, but also fix it, move forward. We all make mistakes. We're all human, but I think it's important for leaders to be able to show that they own their mistakes and they also apologize for their mistakes. What I'm doing next, I have a book right now. I think it's my second book. It's out. It's Seed of Leadership. I have a third book coming out in October called Career Breakthrough Playbook. Get unstuck and get ahead. But also, I'm a certified retirement coach. So I have an event coming September. I'm also always active on LinkedIn. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. There's only one Will Lukang on LinkedIn. Thank you for the opportunity. Great panel.
This was a great discussion. I always am so precise. It's like, okay, so I know if it goes a little bit over, I'm like, that means that the conversation really got good, right? And y'all probably saw me leading over because I'm like, well, I need to plug my own books while we run the panel. So I always have to, because we ran this Prescription for Career Success Summit, and it was really one of our, that is going to happen again. It's going to be our core, and it's happening again next July, right? But from this Prescription for Career Success Summit, we wrote a book. We wrote a collaborative book that became a #1 bestseller. I want you guys to go check it out. It's on Amazon. And we were #1 in the Workplace Resiliency category. So we walked into this thing and came out #1 best-selling authors because people really took an interest in it. And then I also wanted to plug the fact that my sister and I, we wrote a coloring book. Y'all know that I was a school teacher. I done had so many jobs, Jesus. But I was a school teacher back in the day. And both of my sister and I, we work in health science, and we spent 2 years putting together this coloring book and producing videos where if you scan the QR code, it introduces kids to careers in the field of healthcare, right? And so that little school teacher plug, that part of me that loves kids. I know this is a new school year. And the final thing I just want to say is that on September 1st, guys, if you checked out some of the events that we have done, we are doing a whole day of events. We're doing our crash course resumes, our LinkedIn Playbook Masterclass, and our Career Pivot event. We're going to be doing that on September 1st because it's Labor Day. And it's very affordable. It's like a $7 to $10 donations, whatever you want to donate, right? Because we want to make this stuff accessible. So our website is worksolutions.com, WORXK solutions.com. So I'm going to share the link here. We dropped it in the chat. All of this stuff is in the chat. Everybody's contact information and all the great stuff that they're offering is going to also be in the description. We're going to share it with our networks and in our e-blasts because we are so thankful for all of this awesome conversation that we had today and all of our great panelists. And we hope that you took something from the conversation. We'll drop a feedback link in the chat because we want to hear what you have to say. And next month, we're running our last panel. I don't know the date off the top of my head, but we're going to run our last panel in this series. And so we would love for you to join us then. So again, thank you to all of the awesome panelists tonight. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Go check out some of their books, their resources. Check them out on Facebook, LinkedIn, or wherever you can find them, and stay connected with us. Thank you for tuning in. And we hope that you learned something tonight to help you write your prescription for career success by becoming a more resilient leader and investing in your team and in yourself. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank